Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ajiro Tech. All right. In this video, we're going to be talking about a very important subject. Very important. It's important because it is chapter 6 of your textbook for the AS students, the Year 12 students, and is a topic that you would always see in your question day in day out. Yeah, just one question, but most time it's 4 markers, 6 markers, and they help you a lot to understand what you need to do. So we're going to talk about this topic called the digital divide. And this is a personal topic to me because it is the age we're in. We're having such a divide globally, economically, geographically. We have it in all areas, even in infrastructure. And I feel if you give me your time, we can be able to explore this together. So are we ready? Are we ready to learn the digital divide? Okay, Year 12 students. Yeah, students, let's go. So here's my lesson objective that we'll be talking about in this topic. The first thing we're looking at is what is digital divide? We need to know about the definition of it, the measurements, and all that. The next thing we're talking about is causes and effects of the digital divide. We will talk about the fear of IT, economics, and all that. And we'll be talking about the groups affected by the digital divide. What are the groups? Who are the groups of people that have been affected by this digital divide? You have issues with the young and old, urban and rural. And then we'll be talking about the effect of the digital divide. What's the effect of this divide on health, on job opportunities, employment, social interaction? We'll talk about it. And finally, we get to talk about the ways we can reducing the effect of the digital divide. Then we'll start talking about solutions, initiatives, strategies we can put in place to ensure that everybody is included in access to internet, access to computers, and more. So what is the digital divide? When we talk about the digital divide, what does it mean? We often take, internet use for granted. For we adults, we use the internet for everyday activities. I know for me, I use it for online banking, online shopping. Young people use it for social media purposes. All the TikTok influencers, Snapchat influencers, and all that. The Instagram, right? When I talk about Facebook, they said, "Oh, that's a divide." Okay. Okay. So many of us use the internet in one way or the other, and we'll be quite upset, see, if we do not have fast access, such as, which is the very important thing, the good broadband. But for some reason, not everybody has access to, or perhaps wishes to use the internet. There is said to be a divide between the people who can and the people who cannot. So if we're to put this in context, what is digital divide? If you look at your slide, you see the first thing I put there, which is a key term in your definition, the gap. It is a gap. A gap between the people who have access to modern technology and information and those who are restricted, who have no access to modern technology and information. They are being restricted. So we can see it as people who can access telephones, televisions, personal computers, and even the internet from those who cannot. So we see that a divide exists because of the availability of high and low performance computers, wireless connections. In many parts of the world where people struggle to gain access to the use of computers, schools have been provided with low-cost refurbished computers. Now, this is particularly from the US because they want people to have access to it, but we look at issues of performance. So those computers are low specs. You barely even use it to learn the skills that puts you in top of other students or other people in this modern time. The phrase, you see that phrase, the phrase, right, in terms of evolution, was first used as a divide to people who can use computers and people who have computers and people who do not have computers. That was what the divide was all about. Do you have computer? Do you not have computer? That was what, there was no issue of specs or whatever. Do you have computer? Do you not have computer? That was a divide. It was later then extended to the use of internet and broadband. Now we are seeing the divide with people who have access to smartphones, Wi-Fi, and all. So it's an evolution that has been progressing, right? So the digital divide can be caused by an inability of certain people or certain groups to access hardware or software. It can be caused by individuals lacking the required skill to use the technology. So you see here how the evolution has gone forth from the hardware, the divide, right, which we talked about originally was computers. We looked at the divide for internet. We looked at the divide in broadband and smart devices, performances, and all. And we've come to see in the slide and listen to what I've said, how so that other rural areas can be able to be kept to POW or other places, how the US and other developed countries have been providing developing countries with low-end devices so that at least they've not done bad, but we're looking at a divide. That's a divide because they cannot be compared with, in terms of students, with the people who have the devices that can work effectively and those who don't have those devices or probably low-end specs. Talking about specifications. So people use a smartphone to access the internet but benefit from Wi-Fi to avoid high data charges. People don't even have the luxury of even that. So there are some people who don't have the luxury for that. So the absence of this hotspot can markedly reduce internet opportunities for some mobile users. Let's talk about measuring inclusion. There's what we call the ONS. It means Office of National Statistics. So what they do is that they keep track of records of, stats on, in cases like this, internet usage and all. Now there was a survey. Okay, but before we talk about the survey, let's talk about what we have right here in the slide. Now we have what we call the digital skill framework. Okay, now when we talk about the digital skill framework, what is it all about? Now there is the ONS, which is the Office of National Statistics. They refer to the Tech Partnership Basic Skill Framework, right? Which describe 5 basic digital skills that can be used to measure digital inclusion and the activities someone should be able to carry out to demonstrate each skill. And for you to be considered to having a digital skill, that individuals must possess these 5 frameworks. You must possess those 5. You should be able to carry out activities that are listed in this digital skill framework. The first one is managing information. That is, how do you use the search engine to carry out your research? How do you find visited website? How to know how to download or see photos found online. So how do you know how to manage information? The next one is communication. Sending personal messages or email. How do you know how to do that? Do you know how to do that? Do you have the skill for it? Or online messaging service? Or sharing information online? So communication is a skill. The next one is transacting. Okay? Do you know how to buy items or services on a website? Do you know how to install applications on devices? Do you know how to carry out certain services online? Do you know how to? That's transacting. And then we'll talk about problem solving. And when we talk about the problem solving, you're again verifying sources of information found online. Do you know how to verify it? Do you know how to solve a problem with a device, right? Or do you have the skill set for digital services and online help? And then we'll talk about creating. Do you know how to complete online application form? So all the things measures your digital skill if you know how to do all these things. Okay, I have a digital skill. What can you do? Right? Do you know how to complete online application forms? Do you know how to create or edit images or edit music? For the AS students, we talk about your right video editing, audio editing. It's a skill set. And do you know how to create new content? So the report also referred again to the Lloyd Bank in the UK, which uses the framework, okay, to estimate digital skill of the UK population. It estimated the number of people in the UK lacking basic digital skill to see how they were declining. In 2018, there was still a kind of a proportion of people who were taught to have no basic digital skill. I mean, 2018, believe that. They had no basic digital skill. And that became a problem. So these skills form foundation for digital literacy and are essential for full participation in today's society. So if you're lacking in managing information, communicating, transacting, problem solving, creating, you do not have a digital skill. You do not have it. Because this framework defines 5 basic digital skills to measure what? Digital inclusion. And for anybody to consider your proficiency in your digital skill set, you must possess this. So partnering with the Office of the National Statistics, right? They carry out a survey, right, in the United Kingdom. And in 2018, you see right there in your slide that it showed that 5.3% have either never gone online or have not used the internet in the past 3 months. We also have 10%, 1 in 10 adults who remain digitally excluded. And we're coming to see the decline. The number has reduced markedly since 2011. but this amounts to about of it. So you can see that the number has reduced since 2011, showing progress in digital inclusion. So since 2011 to 2018, there have been improvement, because in 2018 the number was more worse than this. Now you have a chart of digital inclusion by age and adults who are not using the internet. So over 50 years old and above, we have 50% of adults who are not making use of the internet. And for 16 to 30, we have just 13% of people who are not making use of the internet. So you can see that these are factors that are affecting it. And you can see that the skill gap is there, the age is a factor, and the income as well matters a lot. We'll be talking about causes and the effect of the digital divide. Let's talk about causes and the effect of the digital divide. Explain why the divide exists. Why does it exist? Is there somebody doing this? Okay. Oh no. The first one is infrastructure. What is IT infrastructure? Infrastructure has to do with hardware, software, and equipment that is used to provide IT services. Okay? We often hear phrases such as infrastructure in rural areas is not as good as urban areas. We often hear that. But what do we mean? That is why I said in IT context, it refers to hardware, software, and equipment used to provide IT services. So these are things that are lacking in the rural areas. Because when you talk about infrastructures, you're being vague. You have to be specific. You see? This includes installation of electrical cables to supply of electricity, the installation of fiber optics cables for high-speed broadband, the installation of mobile cells, phone mat, the installation of your FWA, fixed wireless access unit, and even the launching of satellite for supply of broadband. It is sad that in rural areas, these infrastructures are lacking. And you find this so prominent in the less developing countries. Yes, I know there's a cost challenge to it because it's a lot of money to build. But in times and seasons like this, I'm not talking about in 2025, 2026, that there are some less developed countries who are still in rural areas, who are still having challenges with access to infrastructures, IT infrastructures. And we've talked about the infrastructure disparities. We've talked about the infrastructure components. Let's talk about the first cost. Geography. A divide, local and global. So geographical causes for digital divide, right there in your slide, are visible both locally and worldwide. IT infrastructure can vary significantly between countries and between different areas within the same country. Now we have what we call the LEDC and MEDC. Now the LEDC means less economically developed countries. The MEDC means more economically developed countries. So the less economical developed countries often lack these IT infrastructures compared to the most economic developed countries. And I'll prove it to you. I'll prove it to you. Now, let's talk about the UK and Pakistan, right? Because the UK is the most economically developed countries. The Pakistan is the less economic developed countries. In the UK, it is estimated that 94.6% of the population use the internet. 94.6%. And in Pakistan, 35% of the population make use of the internet. Now you can see the divide. I mean, it's huge. It's a huge divide. Similarly, we have that also in Italy, where the people living in the northern part of Italy are generally wealthier compared to those who live in the southern region. As a result, they tend to have, the northern people tend to have greater access to IT technology. Another one is within individual countries, which is not to lack of money, but location. Let's take, for example, Russia. Russia is a more economically developed countries, but there are certain parts in Russia that don't have access to this internet. Why? Not because they don't have the money, but because of the locations. Because most locations are close to the mountain ranges, and it is difficult to provide the necessary IT requirement. They do have the internet, don't get me wrong, but it's not as fast compared to the urban areas. Why? Because of you have to run the fiber optics to those areas, and that becomes a problem because they have mountains. So putting these infrastructures under like a fiber optics cable becomes a very daunting task. And the providers of these facilities will not want to waste money on that, knowing fully well that if they have to do it, they have to incur their cost into what they have done into the subscription plan, and knowing fully well that the subscribers might not be able to afford it. So they just stick with the urban because it's easy, right? Unlike the locations where you have one house here and the next time you have another house is a very far place. In the urban, it's not like that. Every house is just densely. So it's easier for the fiber optics, right? With one fiber optics, you're able to have, it can be able to service a lot of homes. Even in the UK as well, right? There are some parts of the rural of the country where technology such as 5G or even 4G or fiber optics are not available. Again, this is often because the supplier of this technology tend to focus more on the densely populated urban area. They're talking about cost. You know, I can understand it from a private sector. We can't spend this money and not get it back. That's loss. I mean, if you do economics, you probably know profit and loss. So they want to stick to where they can get, right, the money. So very important. So hope this makes sense. Okay, so you can see the urban and rural, right, between countries. Now, when we look at the rural and urban areas, now let's take India for example, right? Let's take India for example. There was a recent, years back, right? I think that was 2019, right? It is stated that India had 630 million internet subscribers. I mean, that's the second largest number of internet subscribers in a single country. The first is China, right? Now, indeed, the number of internet users in India is large. How do I explain it? It's large to the point that it's a combination of the total population of Brazil, Germany, Russia, and Egypt put together. Russia don't have more population, they have more locations. But for every Indian who had access to the internet, there was at least one who did not. And that person was most likely living in the rural areas. So we see that in rural areas, we had 25% of population who use the internet compared to the urban areas who is what? 98%. So right in the slide, I had to quote the source for any form of plagiarism. That was where I got my report from. So there are numbers of factors that makes it very difficult for people living in rural areas to take advantage of the latest what? Technology. Right? And we are seeing that. And we're seeing what are the advantages. Now let's talk now. It is possible, right, to get broadband wherever there's a phone line. However, in order to obtain broadband, right, that can reach fast speed, right, there need to be an infrastructure that needs to be put in place. In the urban areas, like, it's very easy to do that. It's straightforward. You dig, put in underground, and then you're good to go. With a single fiber optics, you can be able to serve a lot of homes. In rural areas, there are fewer houses. That's what the problem is. You see one house here, before you see the next house, it's probably some miles away. So people are further apart from a single cabinet, which in this case is not so in the urban. So that simply means you're looking at longer cables to be used. And if there are longer cables to be used, it means slower speed. So it becomes difficult to lay fiber cables in rural areas because of that. We see, for example, in India, they have remote mountain areas, thinly populated desert, and dense areas of forest, all of which makes it difficult to install the necessary infrastructures. Any infrastructure that already exists tend to use a lower level technology, making it difficult to even install high-speed broadband. So if we're going to improve this infrastructure, it's going to cost a lot of money. And because of that, just like I said earlier on, these companies are reluctant to invest that sort of money. Because for users who's going to get the broadband, how are they going to pay? You're talking about, can they be able to afford this normal cost? You're not talking about increasing the cost. So they install the broadband providers, the internet service providers, they only install the high technology solutions where it is economically viable. So white towns and cities might have a number of providers competing to persuade potential users to use their equipment. So you've seen this. In rural areas, you only have maybe one or two. And in the urban, everybody's, in fact, 5 providers tell you, we'll do this 20% less. This one say, I'll do it 30% less. So, and then in the rural, you're just having one, barely even two. So the rural broadband requires greater cable length, as well, even signal boosting equipment. And there are fewer potential customers from whom companies can even retrieve the cost. So to them, it's not even worth it to even go through that length. And you can see in the slide why I talked about the slow speed factors, the urban advantage, and how viable it is in terms of finance.
A lot, and you're like, okay, do you have a private tuition? Don't you have? Do you have? And yes, Ajiro Tech do have a private tuition. So by my right, you can see that we have for the EdExcel and Cambridge IGCSE, and yes, we do have for all subjects. Okay, all subjects. Okay, the popular ones that's always been in demand is mathematics, English language as a second language. Okay, we have physics, we have biology, we have chemistry, and we have um, you know the flagship, which is ICT, just here and there. We also have business studies. So if you're interested for a private tuition, I think all you have to do is send an email to the sales team at ajirotech@gmail.com, and they would reply to you, talk about your time zone, talk about, and the fee is really quite affordable. Really, it's really quite affordable. It's when you look at it across other tutoring service, I think this is the one that's quite affordable, and you get the very best of service. We also have for the E-levels as well, and also for the EdXL. So we have for the Cambridge E-levels and EdXL E-levels. Okay, and we have also across the subject mathematics, which is usually the hot cake when it comes to E-level, mathematics and chemistry, and then biology. These are usually one of the ones we have in demand always, all the time, even physics, for E-level. So all you have to do, if you're watching this right now and you are interested for a private tuition, then you can do yourself a solid, okay, and send an email to the sales team at ajiro@gmail.com, and they will reply to you.
The fear of IT. Now, the fear of IT is a real serious thing. And it's caused by the lack of education in IT skill or age-related unfamiliarity. It's easier for young people to want to explore. It's easy for young people to want to explore. It is difficult for older people to want to learn new things. They get scared in learning new things. And this is factor because of age, since older people are less likely to be familiar with IT. Can I say this in all honesty? IT is meant to make our lives easier. That's the whole idea, is to make our life easy. You have your classes online, you are being assessed online, everything is done online. And I mean, you have that comfort space. You have a personal study, you go on YouTube and you're learning from Ajiro Tech, and it's easy. But sometimes, what is easy doesn't really come at ease for some people. So sometimes it actually makes it more difficult for the older people. So as IT device becomes more sophisticated, they tend to become harder to use and learn about. So some people fear them. They believe that when asked to use computers, even ATMs, your smartphones, it means that they have to go and learn. Most people do find the instructions fairly easy to follow. If you teach them, they'll follow it. Why for others? For others, it's not really easy. It's not really easy to learn. Okay. The next one is economics. Well, which is the third course. And then we see that there is a divide here. Wealth. The wealth of some people can be able to, access this IT technologies. And to some people, they are unable to do that. So as technology advances, every new innovations tend to be more expensive. Now we had, currently at the time of the recording, we have iPhone 17. It's quite expensive. They're even thinking, as of the time of this recording, they're right here in 2026, there will be an iPhone Fold, which is really expensive. I think £1,800, right? Or £1,900. Quite expensive. Or is it £2,000 or £2,500? I don't have the actual figures, right now. So anytime there's an innovation, it becomes expensive than its predecessor. So this means that the richer you are, the easier it is to access this new technology. So the people who are providing this thing, they know about this divide. They don't even care. Because to them, and I'll prove this to you. Now, it is in the interest of the IT companies to create new innovations, since they can sell this to people who are better paid, thereby making more money. Why do I have to create 2 million devices and I make 4 million when I can make 500 and I'll make 10 million? Yeah, yeah. Sad, but that's the reality. So there's little incentive to develop solutions that will be suitable for poor people, because this would not result in the same level of profit. At the end of the day, it's all numbers, right? At the end of the day, it's all numbers, nothing more but numbers. As a consequence, development which are produced for the poor members of society tend to be at a very basic level. I mean, you have to be really good. See, I know what I'm saying. Okay, let's talk about teachers, for example. How many teachers can be able to afford an iPhone 17? I'm talking about LEDC, less economically developed countries. How many? How many can be able to afford an iPhone 16? So we probably see them, if they have a love for iPhone, probably see them using iPhone XR, iPhone 7, iPhone 8, maybe an iPhone 11 if they are lucky. So they get to use the basic level. And let's face it, they are less likely to increase their IT skill. I'm not just talking about phones, I'm talking about technology as a whole. How many of them are using the latest gadgets, the latest infrastructure, the latest hardware? So it results in a widening gap rather than narrowing the divide. So it is generally acknowledged that factors such as income, when it comes to economists, we're talking about income. Whether you are able to afford it or not being able to afford it, all boils down to income. And when you have the income, you gain the skill needed to make effective use of the internet. Can you see that? The next one is disability, which is the fourth cause. Having a disability limits some people on the use of IT. And there's a source there, according to WHO, the World Health Organization, there was a data that they gave. They said 15% of the world population live with some form of disabilities, meaning that a large number may be unable to access IT if it's not designed with everyone in mind. And there's a general study that showed that people with disability do not access the internet as much as the rest of the society. There was a case study in Kenya where they laid out a constitution where they had the inclusion of people with disabilities. But the founder of Association of Accessibilities and Equality, Judy Okite, claimed that many accessibility strategies were unfulfilled. in the 2016 policy. And this is a great concern. At least Kenya, they tried to even put out a policy to include people with disabilities. But I think when I made my research now, there's an improvement on it, but it's still not getting to everybody. So the people with disabilities have issues with access. People who are physically disabled makes touchscreen, the mouse, the keyboard difficult to use. And even to get the alternative becomes quite expensive. So it's not put with everyone in mind. People with visual impairment need screen readers, high contrast interfaces, magnification softwares, and not all websites are designed with accessibility in mind. So the research showed that computers have not been replaced for years. Either the software that they had or the hardware or the softwares that they had are not installed, or they have become outdated. The laboratories that they have, the lab staffs, they are not trained to teach users. I've talked about physical disabilities, I've talked about visual impairment. Now, what about hearing impairment? Caption, transcript, sign languages, videos, and visuals alert for audio content. Much online content remain inaccessible without proper accommodations. So we're seeing all these issues and issues and issues and issues that have been going on with people with disabilities. Let's talk about the groups affected by the digital divide. Who experiences the digital divide? Who experiences them? So we'll talk about the rural and urban. I've talked about this a little bit, but I'm still going to go deeper on it. In 2017, the digital strategy from the UK government acknowledges that broadband and mobile must be treated as a fourth utility. So it was not a priority then. It was, the priorities were gas, water, and electricity. Those are things that you must have. Broadband or mobile were not important. So these tend to be available in the rural areas. Now in 2018, the National Infrastructure Commission, the government independent to the advisor of the UK government, stated that the digital connectivity was now an essential utility. That it's not just you having gas, water, electricity, you must have it. And it becomes central to the UK society and economics as electricity or water supply. But here's the problem. This was not done at the beginning with that in mind, because now the poor digital connectivity in rural areas are far-reaching consequences for communities and economies and businesses. Because while we have these superb opportunities in the urban areas, there are some rural areas who are still lacking a little bit of this distribution. You can also see that as well in the US. And I've talked about what happened in India, about numbers of people who are accessing that. 630 million active people who are connected to the internet. Second largest. But even at that, we are still having one person who is still not connected. 1 out of every 10 who is still not connected. But here's the thing, it is possible to get the broadband anywhere near there's a phone line. However, in order to obtain broadband that can reach fast speed, a slightly more advanced infrastructure is needed. So it's difficult with the rural areas and easy with the urban. And that simply means that they may not want to make that investment, right? Because again, you have to look at the cost effectiveness to that. And the alternatives to broadband for people living in rural areas, there are numbers of different options apart from cables, but they can be very expensive. And many people who live in those areas might be in a job which don't pay very well. I mean, if you live in rural areas, your pay is not really good. So wireless technologies are available, such as satellite broadband. We have the Starlink, but it's expensive, right? You have the mobile phone broadband. So the satellite broadband is available anywhere in the world, but it's slow and again more expensive than cable broadband connection. And of course, the quality of those connections can be affected by what? The bad weather. So here we can see the challenges of the rural: low population density, geography features, limited commercial potentials, and so on. So now we've talked about the rural and urban. Let's talk about the developed versus developing nation. Those who are more or less, industrially developed or technologically what? Aware nations. So developed versus the developing nations. Okay. There's a divide between countries, and we see that as a global digital divide. There's been a large scale between developing countries that perform poorly economically and the so-called developed countries that perform strongly. Of course, this global digital divide can cause the economic divide to widen. Of course, some countries feel that they cannot afford to invest heavily in technology, as they need to improve in maybe education, healthcare, and all that. But they forget that when you actually invest in IT, it makes all those things very, very much easy for you. You don't have to worry. You can even have education even online. They forget all these things. It makes it super easy. And it can even generate jobs and provide greater access to better health services and even education. There was a report by doing a conference in the United Nations, right? That by the end of the next decade, right? They had that conference 2018, and they said, okay, by the next decade, which is 10 years after, there should have been growth, productivity gain, human development will be determined by the levels of integration into the digital economy. It was also warned that to guard against new form of inequality, the international community must do more to help developing countries close the connectivity gap. We are not seeing that yet. I'm sorry. I mean, no offense to the UN and to the trade and development, no offense to them, but I'm not seeing any, because the gap is still widening. You can't compare the US, the UK, Russia, China to countries like Pakistan, Rwanda, Chad, Sri Lanka. These are, I mean, in Africa, I mean, maybe apart from maybe Egypt, maybe Kenya, maybe South Africa, maybe Tunisia, Morocco a bit. The rest, they are all developing nations, poor nations, poor. So let's look at just one aspect of the use of IT in commerce. We have, for example, online shopping. It becomes apparent from the UN report that developing countries experience several advantages. Now let's talk about an island. Tuvalu is a tiny island in the South Pacific. It has 10 streets. That have names in the capital. I think Funafuti. Yeah, Funafuti. And only about 100 homes have postal code. Now tell me, how easy will it be carrying out online shopping in such an island? Yeah, so there's a divide. There's a divide. There's a divide. In other parts of the world, billions of people who do not have bank account. There's some people who don't have bank account. They don't have credit cards. You talk about what's credit card. No consumer protection law. Poor postal services. In developed countries, they have it. Consumer protection law is there. So by the end of 2020, which is past already, economic growth would have been governed by IT, and countries must close the digital gap to flourish. Well, we've not seen that anyway. We've not seen that. Okay. The educated versus the uneducated. Uneducated people can be considered to be those people who have not gained many educational qualifications. So that's one way to put it. This restricts their chances of getting a well-paid job. I mean, let's face it. I mean, if you don't have a good education, your chance of getting a well-paid job becomes very limited, unless they are very lucky. Because of this, they have to work in lower-paying jobs, such as performing labor in construction or agriculture. Educated people earn more money through their lifetime leading to a higher quality of life. Uneducated people tend not to earn enough to provide even for their families, which pushes them deeper into poverty. Have you seen some places in Kenya? Oh, God. Have you seen some places in Rwanda? Allah Akbar. Some places in Uganda? Some places in Botswana? Some places in some part of Asia? Guinea-Bissau? Bissau? Republic of Congo? Can't even provide for their families. Living in abject poverty. So how do you want them to invest in IT equipment? How do you want them to get the very best when they cannot even provide? When they cannot even provide for their families. I'm trying to keep my emotion in check. An important factor that contributes to the digital divide is the individual level of educational achievement that relates to the use of IT in schools and classrooms, because these services are not being provided. So there's a divide that exists between educational establishment. I mean, there are schools who have everything and there are schools who have nothing. So there's inequality in digital literacy that can be considerable between schools that have a lot of IT equipment and fast broadband and the use of IT across curriculum, and schools who don't even have one. So this divide among people still exists because uneducated people do not understand the importance of internet in their. They have not been taught. How would they know? You go to those places and you wonder, what's going on here? In a number of areas, particularly urban areas, the problem of providing cheap internet access has been overcome. Why is it then that a divide still exists within cities? Convincing less well educated people that using the internet is beneficial is the real challenge for those who wish to narrow the divide. So they need to be aware. But how can they be aware when these infrastructures are not even there? It saddens my heart, really. It does. It saddens my heart because it is a real challenge. You have the urban areas that have access to this cheap internet, and you have the rural areas who don't even have access to anything. The old versus the young. Oh, don't get me started. The older generation tend to lack confidence when it comes to using IT. I mean, there are older teachers who are scared to even use their computers. So they are used to the normal marker, and I mean the world has transitioned from that, using old markers, and so they were not brought up being exposed. And I don't blame them because they were not brought up to being exposed. But that's not an excuse though, but they were not brought up to being exposed. Like we have the younger generation, the Gen Z. I did a slide on these two divide before I did this one. So I was teaching some students who are preparing for the May June 2026 exam as of the time of this recording for the ES. So I was teaching them and they were like, Mr. Jaro, I'm like, okay, what's the problem? Yeah, talk to me, you're free. They were like, sir, are we free to express? I said, why not? I don't see the reason. I'm not holding you in a hostage, am I? And you're like, sir, the slide is not a Gen Z slide. Now, that was the first time I heard that the slide I prepared, before I prepared this one, was not a Gen Z slide. Oh, so there's a Gen Z slide. I said, yes, sir. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. I was caught up in words and like, okay, I would go work on it. I said, okay, thank you, sir. So, apologies, I didn't do a Gen Z slide back then. So, I think we have a Gen Z slide now. I think so. Okay. Okay. All right. And this is because of the lack of confidence. What they see as fear is developed, right? Making them unlikely or making them likely to avoid this technology. So there's a divide between what is being created between the old and young. The divide is increased because IT businesses wishes to make large profit. So this results in them concentrating on larger group of consumers. Consequently, I'll show you this. New technology tend to be aimed at younger people. The things they are doing is for younger people with very few modifications made to help older people use them easily. So they have the younger people in mind. So that's already a divide between these gadgets, between these facilities. One example is, let's say, the newer smartphones. Have you seen the smartphones now? Now, it was moved from the button that I was used with the keyboards, being able to type my keyboards, to having it on screen. And then now you have swipe and everything. AI is coming in and everything. And to the older people, that looks a lot of things to learn. AI, what's AI? I need to start learning how to use AI to do things and everything. To some other people, that becomes a very, very difficult thing to do. So as people grow older, they tend to focus on what seems to matter today. They're more likely to concentrate on friendship and be emotionally involved with others rather than spending time on machine. As a consequence, many older people may not see the point of using computer for social networking because the only thing they know about is communicating. The younger people, don't get me started, they can spend all day chatting online. Where is their base? Discord, Snapchat, Insta. They said it's Insta. I said Instagram. They said, no, sir, you don't say Instagram. You say it's Insta. Okay. Okay. This Gen Z. Okay. All right. Insta. All right. So apologies for that. Insta. Not Instagram. Okay. All right. Okay. So the older people, we want connection, talking to people, not going online and all that. And that's younger people, right? So there's a German study, right, about this divide, that it may be too simplistic to say there's a divide between the old and young people. That is true. It's just too simple to just say there's a divide. There are factors that are propelling this divide between the old people and the young people. These factors such as gender, education, social economic status come into play. If you're not from the rich family, there's certain facilities you're going to be limited to. If you don't have access to premium education, then it becomes difficult. They also suggest that internet usage among the elderly is increasing, but we continue to be less than the younger ones. Optimists would suggest that the increase in the number of elderly internet users would seem to indicate that the numbers of non-users will reduce and eventually reach zero. So it's doubtful. And numbers of obstacles against this increasing use among the elderly still persist. The funny thing here is that it doesn't seem to be a priority for the developers of these modern IT devices, that older people find it difficult to use. They are now tiny smartphones. Back then we had those huge phones, now tiny. They have difficulty interpreting icons. A large number of elderly people find it difficult to read text on a screen or even use a keyboard due to the visual impairment and other physical handicaps. Older adults tend to use well-established technology and are slower accepting new ones. So there are older people who they already know how to use it, but when there's a new thing, they're very skeptical. So they keep on what they know how to use. So we're seeing that the older generations are less inclined to use recent technologies compared to the younger generation. Younger generation wants to use something that is new. They want to use new things. You talk about iPad or tablets, and the older generation will be like, "What's that? What? Even the French study showed that 1 in 10 adults age over 80, you see the tax there, the statistics on the screen, use the internet. As the age of the user reduces, the percentage of them using the internet gradually increases. We have people who are age under 30, 100% uses the internet. Okay? So that's the divide. So let's talk about The fifth course, the rich and the poor. I mean, this is always going to be a debate all the time. And I mean, for this, essentially, I'm going to tell you, this is going to be a divide for life. Because the rich class, for some reason, they find the light in people who are poor because they feel that when they're poor, they get to use them. But our focus is not on that. Our focus is on the digital aspect. Companies that are producing the hardware and the software for computers used in home have good reasons to make further development. They have good reasons. Selling new updated product lead to them making larger profits. We now have smart homes, right? Where everything is computer controlled. And this products can only be bought by people who can afford them. And obviously the rich people. So there is no need for any company to develop products that will be suitable for the poor people. I'm sorry I'm using that word, but that is what it is. Because they're not going to make the same level of profit. So as a result, the systems and products that are for the poor people, they tend to be less advanced. Which means that the people who buy these cheap products and systems, they don't get the opportunity to increase their IT skills and knowledge. So we have this two aspects of digital divide. This gap between the rich and poor. And this factor, number one, income, affect whether people use IT in generally, or more specifically gain the skill to take advantage of using the internet. As household income increases, the level of basic skill also increases. The divide between the rich and poor still persists despite seemingly to be increasing universally. There have been research that have suggested that rich people still more likely than poor people tend to have good access to the digital resources. Let's talk about stats. Now, for households who are earning less than $30,000, let's look at the stats on the. I use dollars because that's generally accepted. I would use pounds, but again, that stat might not be correct. So I had to use the internet, and all I could find was the dollar aspect. I just wanted to just stick with that. We see that people who had, especially for the Americans, so we're using the Americans for example, and not just USA, the Americans, right? That the household of less than 30K, even the US, of $30,000, roughly 29% don't have smartphones. 44% did not have a broadband service, no internet. 46% don't even have a traditional computer. Majority don't have what we even call a tablet. Just forget about it. Don't have what we call a tablet. This compared with all the technology being present among most households earning $100,000 or more. Many people in poverty, often in less economically developed countries, simply cannot afford to own a computer or even the cost of a broadband connection, which is sad.
A lot, and you're like, okay, do you have a private tuition? Don't you have? Do you have? And yes, Ajiro Tech do have a private tuition. So by my right, you can see that we have for the EdExcel and Cambridge IGCSE, and yes, we do have for all subjects. Okay, all subjects. Okay, the popular ones that's always been in demand is mathematics, English language as a second language. Okay, we have physics, we have biology, we have chemistry, and we have the flagship, which is ICT, just here and there. We also have business studies. So if you're interested for a private tuition, I think all you have to do is send an email to the sales team at ajirotech@gmail.com, and they would reply to you, talk about your time zone, talk about, and the fees really quite affordable. Really, it's really quite affordable. It's when you look at it across other tutoring service, I think this is the one that's quite affordable, and you get the very best of service. We also have for the E levels as well, and also for the EdXL. So we have for the Cambridge E levels and EdXL E levels. Okay, and we have also across the subject mathematics, which is usually the hot cake when it comes to E level, mathematics and chemistry, and then biology. These are usually one of the ones we have in demand always, all the time, even physics, for E level. So all you have to do, if you're watching this right now and you are interested for a private tuition, then you can do yourself a solid, okay, and send an email to the sales team at ajiro@gmail.com, and they'll reply to you.
People with disabilities, people who have issues with one form of physical disability, visual impairment, hearing impairment, find it difficult. People with physical disabilities find it difficult to use touchscreen. People with visual impairment find it difficult to use websites because high construct screen readers, magnification softwares are not being put in place for them. Hearing impairment, most online contents don't even have transcript, captions, sign language videos. We talked about the fact that there was an act by Kenya in 2016 to have inclusion, but over the years we've not seen that. But I think it's getting better now. It's getting better now. The effect of the digital divide. So what are the effects of the digital divide? And how does this divide impact our lives? Let's talk about health. The first effect is health. But before we talk about the health briefly, it's important for us to know that the effect of digital divide includes inequality of access to all types of internet services. The word service is open to interpretation. It simply means what you provide. Internet, such as email, World Wide Web, video conferencing, instant messaging, voice over internet protocol, and other resources, which the internet makes it easy to access. So let's talk about health. There's a vast amount of healthcare information on the web, including details of medicine and illness. Now, AI has made everything easy. You can use AI to know more about what the doctor is saying. There's even websites to contain details about medicine together with information about common illnesses and how to treat them. Some will tell you, okay, visit a doctor or hospital. If it's a minor illness, a website may advise individuals how to treat it themselves. Many doctors have their own websites through which patients can even book appointments. Those online health services. receive reminders by text on their smartphone. They could order prescription. Individuals are able to buy medicine from private websites. Unfortunately, these services can only be accessed by individuals with the necessary IT equipment. They must have a tablet or a laptop or a PC. Not just that, with broadband. Other reasons may not be available to individuals include cost, remoteness, or even lack of electricity. So we can see that it's not just about introducing online health services, IT in hospitals, remote access. Of course, we talk about the hospitals. You see that X-rays, right, which can assess the patients. They can conduct X-rays on the patient body. You can access the patient health chart, which are now all available with computers. Computers are used by nurses to record patients' pulse rate, temperature, blood pressure. Unfortunately, not all hospitals. So even in hospitals, there's still a divide. Not all hospitals can afford the new technology. Some doctors working from home, but if they are coming from rural areas, it becomes very difficult to access for access. So it becomes a limitation. Let's talk about another effect. Education. Many schools these days have access to IT equipment. And the digital divide in education is more likely to depend on the quality of broadband availability. Now, the divide between the rich and poor schools has in many countries been reduced by government providing money to the poor schools in order to improve broadband access. It was a big thing back then. We have the rich school, we have the poor schools. The school for the rich, the way they say it, and the school for the poor. But government coming in, I think the UK government is so good, right? The public schools are really, really good. They have access to these things. Students today are required to have what we call a new academic literacy. In other words, in the current digital educational environment, the students must have these skills. They must be familiarized with this IT equipment. This includes accessing web-based course resources, using online resources, online discussion, even private tutoring. And this is where Ajiro Tech private tutoring comes in, because we are not providing this access to every student across every nation. Yes, the fee might be to some countries quite expensive, and some might see it as a divide, but we are doing our very best. We're a startup. I mean, there's little much we can do really, but we're doing our best to see how we can accommodate as much as possible. So we're trying to provide our own quarter, but it's still a divide. It's still a divide. There's some countries who don't. So there's some countries who are interested, but they have difficulties in payment. So that becomes a divide. Students who are unable to perform these tasks will find their progress seemingly limited. So you see that universities worldwide have taken advantage of the recent advances in IT. There's online submission of assignments, presentation of learning materials in common place. There's a virtual classroom. Students don't have to turn in their work manually. You can just submit their work online and it will be graded. It will be marked. So this gives the more IT literate student an unfair advantage over the less IT literate ones. So the lack of education is a key factor, as people educated to degree level are more likely to be able to use the internet to its full potential and computers in their daily life compared to individuals who left education at the end of secondary school level. Although we live in an age where countries still find it difficult to provide students with regular access to computers and the internet, there's always that discussion on the effect of the divide on education, more on technological skills, as well as providing training. Let's talk about for adults. For adults, a lack of skill in using the computer and IT equipment in general makes it difficult for them to access digital services. I mean, there are teachers who are not versed with this IT equipment. They don't know how to use it. And because of that, I see a lot of teachers who are so good, but they don't know how to be the EduTech teachers. How to be a technological teacher. So they stick with their traditional method and they don't improve. And that becomes a big problem. This service includes aspects such as health, further education, online booking system, online banking, online shopping, access to news, government website, and many more. We'll look at job opportunities. Many jobs in the modern world right now requires IT skill. I mean, let's say 95 really. IT skill, businesses, manufacturing, even supermarkets, shops, they use IT in everyday dealing. So even if you didn't even go to school and you want to work in a supermarket, you need to still have an IT skill. So job seekers must have this skill. We talked about the 5 skills if they are to realize their hope of a job. So the job applicants who don't have this skill, what's going to happen is they're going to be unsuccessful in their attempt to be gainfully employed. So I think schools and colleges have courses to teach IT skill to students, but those poor and rural areas in developed countries often struggle to have enough computers. To even carry out computer practical is a problem. I have in the last May, June, the 2024, I had some students from Pakistan. I think it was a crash course with them. They were sharing computers to do their work because it wasn't enough. In the exam, they had to wait for turns to do their work. This is a big problem. So richer schools do have sufficient computers and can provide students with the necessary skill, which of course contributes to the digital divide. Another area affected by the divide is companies recruiting employees online. So all you have to do is submit your CV, apply online, and then you go for the screen. You do the screening online and everything, and then you're good to go. The use of internet for some time has been seen as an essential way for people both to look and apply for jobs. The question remains whether new technology can even out the inequality that exists among people trying to gain access to meaningful employment. Putting it simply, People without broadband are at a disadvantage when it comes to finding out about job opportunities or learning new career skills. They need to use a computer to make a job, an online job application, divide job hunters into two groups. It consists of those with IT knowledge, adequate knowledge and skill, and those whose skills and knowledge are lacking. I think at this point it is fair to say that many people who grew up with no access to the internet lack the appropriate technology and digital skill that modern job requires. So if there's any organization who's going to pay well, you need to have these skills. You need to have this skill. I mean, to these applicants, they don't even have money to buy a PC or laptop. I mean, they do not even have any computer skill at all. So it may be an applicant. So it may be that an applicant could be required to generate a CV online and then send it using Gmail. If the applicant is a resident of a rural community in a developed country, it may then be unable to access and use the broadband. How is he going to do it? It may not even have the experience of typing document and does not have an active email account. Some people don't have an email account. So ask them of your email. They ask, what's that? However, it is not only computer literacy that is crucial, but also a greater awareness of the latest technological tools. I mean, in our online classes, we use Microsoft Teams. But when we started, we're using Zoom. We use Zoom, Google Meet. For the US students, we use Slack. We create a platform. We use Slack for it. We use Blue Jeans. I mean, there are teachers you ask this thing, they'll be like, what's that? Some people don't even know about Microsoft Teams. There was one time we kind of had an interview on some teachers. I said, okay, the interview is going to be on Microsoft Teams. They're like, sorry, I don't know Teams. I know they will tell me I know Google Meet. I know how to use Google Meet. I don't know how to use Microsoft Teams. Now that's a divide. How about social interaction? The use of IT technology has been fundamental in improving what? Social interaction between people. Social networking websites have been very effective in making communication and staying in touch with friends and relatives so much easier. So it's easier to communicate with the people across the world. People can now keep in touch with friends and family, even make new friends using these sites. The use of the internet allows people to have these opportunities, but this can create a social divide between those who have developed this skill and those who are lacking in this. And such divide creates the possibility of social inconsistency in the community. There are people who don't know what Snapchat is. I thought maybe it's to snap and then chat. Somebody told me that. Do you mean snap and then chat? Okay. Such division creates the possibility of social inconsistency in the community, where wealthy people can have computers and access the internet while poor people cannot. And there are other uses for the internet. We have online booking, where you can book for your train. You have to pay. You don't have to go there. You can book for your train, right? You can book for your travels, right? I use booking.com to do that. You can book for it. If you're going for a vacation, it's now easy. You can personalize your experience rather than having a travel agent plan it for you. In developed countries, customers use PC, smartphones to browse travel-related content and offers. In developing countries, internet access can often be available to the small proportion of population that has a relatively high income. Of course, it's been improving, but we are still seeing that. Having access to internet does not necessarily mean that people will use it wisely. In addition, there are people who have access to broadband and the internet, but are not able to use it effectively because of lack of what? Knowledge. You can book for your train, it's done online. You can plan for your train journey and all that. Online banking, right? You can pay for your bills, utilities, make transfers, make payments. But in rural areas, they still suffer from the traditional bank because bank can close. And then once the bank closes, you're not able to carry out any transaction. But why in the urban areas, they're able to still carry out transaction irrespective of whether the bank is open or not. Online shopping, you can be able to browse for cheaper deals, compare prices. You can do that any time of this convenience to do that and get it delivered to you. But in rural areas, they still rely on what? On the bricks and mortar retail outlet. Right? And those stores that have no physical, that has only digital footprint, they will make more profit than those that have physical shops because their customer base is far and wide. What about news access? News right now are now being accessed digitally. New York Times, BBC, Sky News, Manchester Evening News, ABC, Australian Broadcast Corporation. It's accessed online. The Wall Street Journal. And there are rural areas that still rely on the physical newspaper to see what is going on. People use the government website for a variety of reasons, obtain information on statistics, government research, download forms or application, find information about government sponsorship and visas, pay fine online if you need to. And finally, reducing the effect of the digital divide. What are the solutions? What are the initiatives? The first one is infrastructure. One way is to enable faster and cheaper access to internet. This would reduce the divide. It's not going to take it out, but it will reduce it for those who have access to the internet and those who do not. However, it still does not get over the problem of those who, or even though they would improve access, will not even engage with the technology. People need to have the skill to use it and also trust, or at least the lack of fear of using it. Developing digital skill and digital literacy courses have been shown to lead towards positive effect on employability, social inclusion, and general well-being. Reducing this digital divide requires partnership between government, the private sector, and IT experts. Government can provide incentive to private industries as well as investment for rural projects. And in addition, introduce incentives to even state and local government education. They can build up broadbands and other communication infrastructures, but this cannot be done by one group. The problem we're having is selfishness because they can all come together to get this thing sorted out. Digital literacy and training. Next one is education. Digital literacy course can lead to positive effect and employability. We talked about that. Teaching the elderly. The young people should learn how to teach the elderly. That will also help them. Don't just keep this skill to yourself. Also teach the older people how to use them. So there should be teaching program within the communities, teaching other people how to use this technology. Children from poor community also suffers. One way to help them is to release cheap PCs or laptops to these school-age children. In the UK, there are numbers of companies that offer reduced prices for refurbished computers to children in families receiving state benefit. Unfortunately, the downside is that the broadband dongle costs almost as much as the PC itself. Okay, even in developed countries, providing computers for the less economic developed countries. We see issues with Comcast initiatives. Kenya is often referred to as the African digital heartbeat. The Kenya government produced a national ICT policy. These were aimed to create sufficient incentive to the private sectors to provide people with disabilities with access to fast internet connection. Information providers, including the government, would also be required to produce content in suitable formats to that people with disabilities, which will have easy access. Which will have easy access. There are numbers of organizations that helps government in developing countries provide schools with computer. Okay, non-profit organizations to provide PC for schools, and they have done so mostly in African countries like Rwanda, Burundi, Zambia, and others. We have seen how people living in rural areas have no or poor access to internet. One solution is to what? Create cyber cafe. We talked about it here. Cyber cafe. Create cyber cafes. Okay. So at least they can have access to internet. So the Comcast initiative in 2019, one of the largest telecommunication company in the USA in 2019, developed a series of initiatives to help people with disabilities who have low income to gain access to the internet. So they were included for a grant to the American Association for People with Disabilities, helping to delivery of digital literacy training programs, and that knowledge that the internet is a wonderful thing, providing people with the skill on how to use it. In closing, the digital divide is a complex challenge requiring collaboration between government, the private sector, the educational providers, and IT experts. If we address these issues in infrastructures, providing skills, accessibilities, we can work together towards digital inclusion. So if we have all these things put together, and let's remember that the internet is not just for some people, it's not just for a class, it's for everyone. Not just for someone, it is for everyone. Thank you very much. And please do want to subscribe to this YouTube channel. And if you have not joined our Discord community, both for the IGCSE and the A-level, the link is right there, right? bit.ly/IGCSE-community. That's where we posting most of our videos. Because of the copyright constraint, will not be posted on our YouTube channels. But however, go in there. It will be on our YouTube channels, but just to tell you that it's going to be on our Discord. So thank you, and I'll see you in the next one. And also, before I go, if you're not enrolled into our private tuition program and you need help, please do so. Don't wait until it's too late. Don't wait till the day of your exam. Early preparation is a good preparation. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.